Are you curious what it's like to make 6 original cocktails in 6 minutes inside a Mexican wrestling ring while wearing a tiger mask? What does Manhattan, why does Manhattan have its own area code hidden inside the cocktail recipe? And which classic cocktail made bartenders shake a drink for a full 12 minutes? Well, tonight you're going to get those stories and tips and more. Now, if you're watching this video on the replay, please get into the comments and type the word replay. I'd love to hear from you. And of course, if you're here with me on the live stream, tell me where you're logging in from, what's in your glass, what's the weather like. I'm Natalie McLean, and I teach online food and wine pairing classes, and you've just joined one of the most passionate groups of food and wine lovers and cocktail lovers who gather every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern to talk to the most interesting people in the world of drinks. Now, I'm live streaming this video for the first time on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, but it's based on a recorded conversation I had with our guest, whom I'll introduce momentarily. But the recording was for my podcast, Unreserved Wine Talk. But I will be here live in the comments, so get in there. Let me know, what questions do you still have? What stories or tips are you enjoying? I want to hear from you. All right, before I introduce our guest, just let me say that 3 of you are going to win a copy of her terrific new book, 3 Cheers, Cocktail Classics, Modern Twists, and Zero Proof Sips. All you have to do is email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com and let me know you want to win a copy. I'll choose 3 people randomly from those who contact me. All right, back to our guest. Kaitlyn Stewart is an internationally recognized global bartending champion with over 20 years of hospitality experience. In 2017, she became the first Canadian to win the prestigious title of Diageo's World Class Bartender of the Year. Beyond the bar, she is an author, a recipe developer, a consultant, and a content creator with nearly 1 million followers across her likable cocktail social platforms. Kaitlyn travels extensively to conduct seminars, judge cocktail competitions, and host guest shifts at some of the world's top bars. She was recently ranked 65 on the Drinks International Bar World 100 Most Influential People list and recognized as one of Imbibe 75's Ones to Watch. She has also been a multi-time nominee and shortlist finalist for the Tales of the Cocktail Spirited Awards in the categories of International Bar Mentor and Best Broadcast, Podcast, or Social Media Channel. And she joins us now from her home in Vancouver. Welcome, Kaitlyn. We're so glad to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Happy to have a chat with you today.
All right. Okay, so let's jump into it. You write in your book that your mom and dad met working at a restaurant and practically raised you and your sister in booth 17. So
Yes.
Where was this? It was obviously in a restaurant somewhere, but was it in Vancouver?
Yeah, it was. You know what? My parents met while working at kind of like a Canadian or West Coast Canadian establishment called The Keg, which is a steakhouse.
Yes.
And my dad started working there probably when he was about 18 or 19 years old, and worked his way up through the ranks of dishwasher to, manager to all of the things. And my mom was working there as a hostess at a different keg than where my dad was at, but they happened to cross paths and meet each other, and kind of the rest is history, where they met at the keg, and that's where my sister and I spent many of our formidable years growing up. I'm pretty sure my first solid meal was a steak.
So you're well fed.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, it was kind of cool because my parents came from hospitality, and then I kind of just fell into it myself, which is great.
Yeah, it runs in the family. So you actually, though, took a detour. You studied film and television at university while bartending and teaching dance.
Yep.
We have that in common, by the way. Walk me through the actual day that you stopped seeing bartending just as a side hustle or a way to pay for university, and you thought, this could be a career.
Yeah, you know what? I loved going to school for film and television. When I was younger, I did a lot of like acting and stage work in front of the camera. And I was really interested about learning what was happening behind the camera. And obviously going to school, and it's expensive, and you got to pay for tuition and all that. And so I worked, at different bars and restaurants because tips are great, and it was a good way to make some money pretty quick.
Hmm.
And I kind of fell in love with the whole like hospitality aspect of it. Obviously, seeing my parents kind of go through it my entire life, they never nudged me about getting that, quote unquote real job, or like do something that you're studying. And it was when I went to university in Toronto, and when I moved back to Vancouver, I worked at a place called Boulevard at the Sutton Place Hotel, and that's when I first met my like real bar mentor, a man by the name of Justin Taylor, and he kind of showed me this entire other world of bartending that I never knew existed, which was kind of that competition bartending. And
Hmm.
he kind of showed me that I could put my passion of that kind of, film TV world into bartending by telling stories and, taking people through experiences, not just serving a cocktail. So it was
Right.
then when I met Justin where I was like, oh, this is an interesting side. I can kind of put both of my passions together and still
Yeah.
like do what I love. Like this is cool. So yeah, it was probably then where I figured I was like, oh, I can make this a career. I can travel the world. All right, let's stick with this.
Sign me up. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's very much a performance art because at the World Bartending Competition, which you won, you had to make
Hmm.
six classic cocktails in 6 minutes inside a Mexican wrestling ring in front of 300 roaring fans. And
Yes.
you were wearing a tiger mask as
I,
well.
you know what? I put my Lucha Libre tiger mask on at the very end, thankfully, because I think that would have impeded me a little bit. But yeah, I mean, that whole competition was fantastic. And that particular round was 6 drinks in 6 minutes, high stakes. The energy in the room was going and everybody was enjoying and have a good time. But the total of that competition, I probably did like 75 different drinks from start to finish
Really? Oh
with
my
a bunch of
goodness.
different challenges. With a competition like that, you have to win your country first. So I had to compete
Okay.
in Canada so I could then go on to represent Canada against all of the other country winners.
Right.
Every year it changes. So every year it's in a different location. So the year that I did it, the finals were in Mexico City. Actually, just this last year, the finals were in Canada for the first time in Toronto. But we've been to Brazil, we've been to China, we've been all over the world, Australia, and yeah, that adrenaline is going. So being on stage and having to perform in front of people, but while making drinks, I was like, all right, I got this. Let's go. This is fun. The energy in the
Good
room like kept
attitude.
me going. Exactly.
That's excellent. And so, did they throw you into a Mexican wrestling ring just to make it, I don't know, up the stakes or make it more visually
Definitely.
interesting? Okay.
Definitely. There's always a little bit of like you want to bring some of the culture in to every finals. So being in Mexico City and being that, the luchador is kind of like this, popular kind of mainstay for the Mexican culture there. They're
Okay.
like, this will be fun. Let's wheel a bar into the middle of this Mexican wrestling ring and no
Go
pressure,
for
but now
it.
you got to make
Yeah.
drinks in front of a bunch of fans who are like holding up signs and wearing masks themselves. And yeah,
Wow.
it's kind of hard to describe the energy, but it was one of those things
Yeah.
where I'm like, when I first started bartending 20 years ago, I never imagined that this is what I would be doing.
That's great. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. So, after being named the world's best bartender in Mexico City,
Hmm.
what was the first thing your mom said when you walked in the door, when you got back?
Oh gosh, I think both of my parents, having been in hospitality, their whole lives too, kind of just looked at me and was like, look at you, look at where you can take this. Not in a
Right.
million years would I ever imagine like our kid is traveling the world, getting to make drinks for people. It's something that never really crossed their mind either. Like when you get into like owning and running restaurants, you're not thinking about, you know, being whisked off to places and making drinks for people all over the place. But yeah, I mean, they're the most supportive, proud parents you could ever ask for. So they were like pretty stoked. And my mom doesn't drink; she's a non-drinker, and it's really fun because she gets to watch the kind of like the glitz and the glamour and the fun of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad gets to taste the drinks, and he's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah,
Good
this one's great. This
combination.
one's good."
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
That is great. So the judges described your performance as showing ingredients brought together in ways that they'd never seen before. Which of those ingredient pairings have you continued to use in your bar menus?
Ooh, you know what? I'm kind of a traditionalist when it comes to cocktail making. Like I love the classics because I think, they're classics for a reason. They've withstood the test of time. But it's really
Mm-hmm.
fun to kind of bring in, I would say, kind of like your own local terroir to things. So when I was going through it, I was obviously using a lot of Canadian stuff, but a lot of like local Vancouver stuff. I'd been very fortunate to kind of through my years of working in restaurants to develop really good relationships with certain foragers and, like local artisans here in Vancouver.
Uh-huh.
And I was able to bring in some of those ingredients of what we find here on the Pacific Northwest, whether it's like, candy cap mushrooms, which when you actually infuse them into spirits, they kind of taste a little bit like maple syrup, or spruce tips that, that I've forged myself in the park. So for me, it's kind of like honoring that classic, but also bringing in that like local kind of flair to it, which I still really love and enjoy doing, even, this many years later. I think it's interesting.
Right.
It's kind of fun to show off where you're from and the
For
flavors of
sure.
your city. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, that's a great way to do it. Now, let's talk about Three Cheers, the book, which is wonderful. Tell us in a nutshell what the book is about. Cocktails, obviously, and
Yep.
presenting them three ways. But how is it different from other cocktail books?
So I kind of had the idea for this book for many years, and I didn't really know how to bring it to life. And when I met Stephanie, who is my book agent, she kind of like helped guide me, put it into the proper direction to see it kind of get out there into the world. But for
Mm-hmm.
me, as I said, classics were really important. When I first started bartending, all those years ago, I was actually a sober bartender for about 4 years, so I didn't drink.
Oh,
So for
okay.
me, learning the classics was like super fundamental, because I could follow a recipe to the T. I could taste all of my like sub ingredients, like my juices and my syrups and whatnot. But I knew if I followed that recipe, the drink was going to turn out good. So for me, that was always my foundation. So when I was thinking about Three Cheers, I was like, I still want to honor this foundation, but then I want to kind of like show my version of like what this classic could be. But then again, I have so many people in my life that don't drink that I wanted to
Right.
keep this as inclusive as possible. And, when I started bartending 20 years ago, there was no such thing as a non-alcoholic gin or a non-alcoholic
True.
aperitif.
Yeah.
And what we were having was like a Virgin Caesar or a Virgin Bloody Mary or a pina colada without the alcohol. And so for me, it was really important to kind of showcase like, yeah, if you just put like a little bit of effort in, you can also make a really great non-alcoholic old fashioned, Negroni, daiquiri. So I wanted the layout of the book, when you open it up, you open to that recipe of a Paloma and you've got all three recipes side by side, giving them equal showing, saying not one is more important than the other. Everybody's on equal footing here. So even if you are a drinker, but you just don't feel like drinking that day, go ahead and choose that non-alcoholic one because that is going to be just as good as the classic or my variation of it.
Sure.
And yeah, for me, I'm a big champion of inclusion in any and every way. So I don't want
Hmm.
somebody who doesn't drink to think that they are just an afterthought, like, oh, they'll just have a juice and soda. It's like, no,
Right.
I can make
Right.
you something delicious, just as delicious, even more delicious.
Absolutely. And now, like in the wine world, when they take out alcohol, they're often adding sugar
Hmm.
or something else
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
make up for the lack of either body or taste or flavor or whatever. Is that happening in cocktails too? Do you have to add like a lot of sugar or other
You
things to
don't
make up for the alcohol?
yeah, you don't necessarily have to add a lot of sugar, although especially when you are making de-alcoholized anything, what you're missing is kind of that like I want to say like that burn almost, right? That mouthfeel, that
Right.
body. So there's
Right.
other ways to bring it in there. So I love to use tea for an example. Like tea is if you're over steeping a tea, you're gonna get that really nice tannic nature, that kind of drying,
True.
the drying of the palate. So there's ways around it to find other ingredients without having to like overload something with sugar. But obviously body is always important in a cocktail. Um, but again, you can find that with many different things without having to up the sugar level on it.
Good to know. Okay. What was the most difficult part of writing the book?
Ooh, you know what? I've been writing recipes and drink recipes for a long, long time. So I found that part to be like pretty easy because that's what I do for, my everyday kind of job in life. Um, but it was more so like I really wanted to put an emphasis on making these recipes as accessible as possible. So
Hmm.
I could go off in some like crazy, wild, eh, interesting, unique cocktail, but like who's going to make it? Like, if you
Right.
need 17 different specialty ingredients and 3 days to make something, I really wanted to make sure that this book was, again, that like inclusivity was there, that it was accessible for all. Like, I don't want this just to sit on the shelf and not be used. I want somebody to
Sure.
be able to open it up and be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's easy enough. I can make this, this, and this. So for me, it was really about kind of, paring down the recipes a little bit just to make sure that they were that accessible recipe. That and probably, I mean, like just the consistency of writing, like making sure that everything was the same from page to page, and how I spoke about building the cocktail, and how I spoke about, or how I wrote out certain things. Especially
Okay.
being Canadian, I like to add a lot of extra U's in, color and all that kind of stuff. So
Uh-huh.
I had to make sure that my editor and I were on the same page when it came to making sure all the spelling was correct, and everything kind of followed the same cadence. But yeah, it was a
Sure.
fun process. It was really interesting.
Oh, good. Now, the Manhattan classic cocktail follows
Yeah.
the 2-1-2 rule. Two
Yes,
parts rye, 1 part sweet vermouth, 2 dashes of bitters. 212 is the actual area code, phone code of Manhattan.
it sure is.
Um, so was that the classic way to make it, or did you just come up with 212, or
No,
how did that come about?
I mean, that's the story of the Manhattan. So
Okay,
it's always been the 212, and I think that's how it kind of got its name, the Manhattan, because of
right,
those measurements. And
sure,
when diving into the history of all the classics that I picked for the book, it
yeah,
was really fun learning those like little extra tidbits of
yeah,
information, because I feel like people like to know that stuff. Whether you're
yeah,
reading it in a book or sitting across from a bartender, at a bar or a restaurant, and they say like, "Hey, did you know that the Manhattan is, because of the 212?" And it's a fun little
yeah,
like did you know little tidbit. But yeah,
yeah.
it's 212 because of the recipe, and named aptly for the Manhattan.
Yeah, people love those little backstories. It
Yeah.
really makes it memorable. Now, the Knickerbocker cocktail is
Hmm.
named after the short pants the Dutch settlers wore in New York.
Hmm.
Of all the cocktails in your book, which has the most sort of strange origin story behind its name?
Feel like there's a few that have like interesting ones where I couldn't necessarily like find the origin of the name, that I was still kind of like, why is it called like a sex on the beach? Like where did that come from? That like that was the name that they picked for that. Like,
Right.
it's just like you can kind of figure out like that it's a cocktail from the late 80s, and like fresh juice was finally introduced to drinks. But it's like, oh, I wonder, like, I guess maybe it's like, oh, you like it so much that maybe that's what you want to do after you have a few. I don't know. But yeah, that's I'm trying to think if there's like another that had like kind of a fun, interesting, unique story. But yeah, I mean, they all have, their own little history to them.
They do.
Whether
They
it's like
do.
the Naked and Famous, with Joaquin Simo,
Walking Simo?
put
What's that?
Joaquin. So he's a
Oh,
bartender. Yeah. So
oh,
he was
okay.
the creator of a drink called the Naked and Famous, and which is
And what? Why
another,
did he name it that?
because I think he like drank too many of them and then wanted to
Oh,
get, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's a that is a great question. I gotta ask Joaquin. I was actually just with him last week too. But I mean, there's so many drinks like that where you have like the last word or the corpse reviver #2, and they all have kind of these
right.
old wives' tales to them. Where especially with the corpse reviver, it's like, oh, it's meant to like be drank as like a hangover cure and like revive you from the dead from the night before. But like if you actually look at the ingredients, you're like, that would put me in the grave because it is a strong drink. So some
That's
things just
great.
sometimes don't match up. But
Yeah, no, I love it. Now, the mojito's roots trace back to the 16th century when it was called the El Draque and
hmm
made with, oh boy, you're going to have to help me, Argente?
hmm yeah.
Arguente, a cane spirit that predates rum. So tell us who Sir Francis Drake was and how this cocktail came to be named after a privateer.
Yeah, I mean, he was like a famous explorer, and he settled in Cuba in around like the 1580s, 1585.
Hmm.
And he was kind of known as like a rogue pirate of sorts. And his crew, I believe, came down with like scurvy. And so the
Ah,
locals there were making him a concoction of, their local spirit with a bunch of lime juice, because a citrus juice was supposed to help with scurvy. And so
right.
they were making him and his crew this drink basically as a scurvy cure.
Huh.
Yeah, so that's kind of how it came to be. And then now obviously you're adding in sugar, and yeah, as you go down, drinks evolve over the years for accessibility of ingredients and all that. But yeah, it was actually a scurvy cure for
Yeah,
this explorer and his
that's
his
fascinating.
crew of
Yeah.
pirates.
And I think that's why British sailors often became known as limeys because they were eating the limes to stave off the scurvy. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Now, the espresso martini was
Hmm.
reportedly born when a top model walked into a Soho brasserie in London and asked the bartender there, Dick Bradsell, to make her something, quote, wake me up and mess me up.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a nice
so,
way to put it.
was it the up down of the espresso will, is caffeine, and then the down part's the alcohol? I mean, what was she getting at there?
I think she was getting at just that though, like something that's gonna like wake me up and get me going.
Yeah,
So it's not just a shot of espresso.
right.
She still wants that after effects of maybe a little bit of alcohol. But Dick
Yeah.
Bratzel is one of those like he was one of those great bartenders who he's known for a few modern day classic cocktails, and the espresso martini being probably the most popular one. But for him, it was like they had a coffee machine right next to his station at the bar he was at, and it was an easy like, oh, I got the espresso, let's put it in here, let's add a little bit of vodka, let's add a bit of sugar, a little coffee liqueur, and away you go. And again, it's one of those modern day, technically a modern day classic cocktail because it's from the 80s, and it's listen, it's never not popular. So it'll definitely pick you up, especially if you're using, caffeinated espresso and if you're having a
Yes.
couple of them late at night. And because they're so easy to drink, it will tend to mess you up.
And how did you put your own twist on that one?
Ooh, I think for that one, I personally, I don't drink a ton of espresso martinis, especially after 4 p.m. because I can be very
Right.
sensitive to caffeine. But
Sure.
I often like to make my espresso martinis with tequila. So instead of
Ah.
using vodka as the base, so I kind of went with more of like a Mexican coffee situation. So I have
Oh.
a bit of tequila, some ancho reyes, which is an ancho chili liqueur, which gives it a little bit of spice and heat, some chocolate bitters in there because coffee and chocolate always works really nice, but giving it a little bit more of that kind of, flavorful kick versus just the alcoholic kind of kick that you're going to get from it. But yeah, it's fun to kind of, like you said, use these recipes just as a base and like a springboard to get creative with.
Sure. Now, the Ramos Gin Fizz was originally shaken for 12 full minutes by a team, you say, of Shaker Boys, passing
Shaker
it down
boys.
the line at Henry Charles Ramos Bar in 1888. What's the longest you've ever made a single drink for a customer? Like, did it take a long time? Were there many steps?
Yeah,
Was it
I
a
mean,
special occasion?
honestly, like there's ways around making the Ramos Gin Fizz now that it won't take you 12 minutes to shake. We've found kind of like modern, techniques to kind of, pick that process up a bit.
Right.
But, sometimes you want to be a traditionalist and, give it a go. So the Ramos is probably one of those drinks that is taking me the longest to make just because technically you're supposed to shake it until you can't hear the ice shake anymore within your tin. And so that's
Okay.
why he had a group of Shaker Boys. And if you go down to New Orleans and you go to like the Sazerac bar or you go to the Carousel bar and you ask for a Ramos, they're still going to make it like the traditional way because it's
Really?
one of those
Wow.
New Orleans cocktails that they're famous for. But yeah, I would say that the Ramos is definitely one of those ones that's like this is going to take some effort. Now there's other drinks that you can make that may take a long time in the like prep stage, but not necessarily in like the execution. So if you're making something like a milk punch where you need to clarify your cocktail using milk, that usually takes a few hours and you would make that ahead of time. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the Cantarito is
Mm.
served in unglazed clay cups in Jalisco because the alkalinity of the clay neutralizes the citric acid, and the cups are smashed on the ground after to return them to the earth. Have you ever served a drink in a vessel that was unique?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, gosh, there's so much interesting glassware out there these days now, and I've definitely used, traditional cantaritos as vessels. It's fun when you can kind of go down to Jalisco or go to Guadalajara and collect them from like the source. And I have a
Okay.
few. I believe I used to serve I've served drinks in like juice boxes. So I've like, taken like a traditional like sunripe apple juice box and, emptied the contents and then been able to like refill it and, have like a fun take on like a kid slash adult style drink for like
Yep.
nostalgia's sake.
Yeah.
Trying to think if there was anything else that I've used many different mediums, whether it's like, a hand carved wooden vessel, hand blown glass. But yeah, I mean,
Wow,
you can kind of if it holds liquid, you can serve it in it. I'll
that's
say that
great.
much.
Awesome. The aperitif spritz exists because Austrian visitors to northern Italy in the 1800s splashed soda water into the local wines to make them lighter. What modern spritz variation do you think will be in cocktail books, say 50 years from now? Or you can even say what's newly trending now if you don't have a prediction.
Totally. You know what? The spritz is one of those drinks where again, come the summertime, come anytime the sun pops out, everybody's ready for like spritz weather. And I feel like the last couple of years, obviously the Aperol spritz kind of reigns supreme, but
Mm-hmm.
the Hugo spritz has definitely kind of like jumped in there as well. And the Hugo spritz is made with Saint Germain or like an elderflower liqueur, so it's still got
Okay.
that kind of lightness. It's just not as bitter as a Aperol spritz. It's got a bit of
Okay.
fresh mint and all that good stuff. But I think you can pretty much spritz anything.
Hmm.
So I think more like different Amaros, like Chinar or Amaro Montenegro. Spritzing those is super easy. For me, I love using Lambrusco as my like spritz
Ah,
base to kind of
okay.
almost make like a spritzy sangria, if you will.
Right,
Because,
because it's
you
the
know,
red sparkling wine from Italy. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's one of my favorites. So I feel like the Lambrusco Spritz is like on the uptick as well.
Okay.
But yeah, the Hugo Spritz is I think the most popular one at the moment, at least
All right.
in my findings.
Well, now we're current, so that's
There
good.
we
You
go.
know. Now, the Hotel Georgia, your hometown drink from the 1940s Vancouver, gets gin, orgeat, lemon, orange blossom water, and egg white. What does it taste like?
So think of a gin sour,
Okay.
but with the orgeat is going to give it a little bit more of like a richer, creamier taste to it. Now, typically orgeat is made from almonds, but you can now kind of make orgeat from any type of nut or seed. So you can do like pumpkin seed orgeat, you can do sesame, you can do pistachio, macadamia. But the Hotel Georgia itself, it's got this pretty traditional gin sour base, and then with the orgeat and just because there already is orange blossom water in orgeat, it just kind of gives it this kind of slightly floral edge to it. But it's such a tasty drink. And I know some people get a little bit timid when it comes to egg whites and cocktails. But that's all about the texture because you want that texture to be kind of rich and creamy and have this nice body to it. But it's a delicious drink and I don't think it's ordered nearly enough.
All right. Wow. Okay. So now you call oleo saccharum, Latin for oil sugar, a lush, oily sugar syrup that's perfect for adding more flavor to your favorite cocktail. Tell me about the first time you used it and realized that this centuries old technique was really magical.
Yeah, you know what? When I first read about the like oleosaccharum or oleosaccharum, depending on where you are, how you say it, um, pardon me. When I was looking through old cocktail books, because it was something that was used like pretty regularly, if we go back to kind of those pirate days of, people being on ships for months at a time, packing citrus in sugar was a preservation method, because then it wouldn't go bad. And so when they were packing these fruits in sugar, they noticed that because of the rubbing back and forth that this like liquidy kind of oily substance was being created and it was super tasty, so it was this beautiful sweetener. So it was first used in punches. So I mean, and punches were kind of one of those things where it was like whatever we have we're throwing in a bowl and hopefully it tastes okay because spirits weren't tasting great back then.
Right.
Pardon me. So I first discovered it when I was reading old recipe books and I saw that an oleosaccharine was being made, and I remember making it and being like, "This is so cool," because you kind of just like set it and forget it, and you put it into a container, you put it into a Ziploc bag, and you kind of leave it alone for a couple of hours, and you watch this natural kind of osmosis happen where this liquid gold is coming out of these peels. Um, so yeah, I think I was a fairly young bartender when that happened, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I mean, old techniques are definitely." There's still some use in there, right? Like
Yeah,
they're
no,
there
that's
for a
great.
reason. Hmm.
It's fascinating. Now, you teach readers to make tepesh, the fermented pineapple drink, by leaving rinds and core in water with sugar, lime, cinnamon, cloves, star anise, and nutmeg for 48 hours. Has that always worked out for you, or like, did you have to perfect it over time?
Yeah, I mean, tapache is again, it's kind of one of those older things like an oleo sacrum, where it's waste not, want not, right? If you've got the means, if you're using the juice or if you're just slicing the fruit, then you end up throwing away half of the contents. So there's this natural yeast on the outside of pineapples, and so obviously fermentation has been around for centuries. That it's one of those things where it's like I'm sure it was a happy accident for somebody at some point. But yeah, you have to be careful anytime you're doing any sort of fermenting or using a fermentation technique. You always have to be careful because of temperature changes things a lot. I've definitely had ferments explode on me because
Really?
it sat in an area where it got too hot, and so therefore it
Ah,
starts to bubble way too quickly, and you don't have a chance to kind of like burp your vessel and all that. Or like, or it just doesn't take at all because there wasn't enough like natural yeast. But yeah, it's one of those things where I love making kombuchas and like tapaches and different things like that because, like I said, it's kind of the most natural thing.
right.
And to be able to kind of like get so much flavor out of something that's kind of seen as like a byproduct or a waste, I love that because it's like, yeah, waste not, want not.
Sure, sure. And
Yeah.
now you suggest using a milk frother instead of dry shaking for egg white drinks. Where did that hack come from, and what did the old school bartenders say when you started using kitchen tools?
Like I said, kind of like I said with the Ramos Gin Fizz, obviously there's like traditional methods, but it's like you're not reinventing the wheel, you're just making
Mm,
improvements on it.
sure.
So where you can kind of cut corners, it helps. So if you're in a busy service and you don't have time to like physically dry shake and then add ice again and then shake again, so it's like it's a nice, I used to do it a lot with like a milkshake machine, so I could literally just put it onto like my milkshake machine, leave it, do something else, come back to it, and then continue on like building out the drink. But
Right.
I feel like these little techniques that kind of pop up. This industry is such a great place to kind of share knowledge and share ideas. So everybody ends up kind of like sharing these little techniques with each other, and we all kind of build upon them and make them even easier for ourselves. So the milk frother is one of those things where it's like obviously when you're all you're doing when you're dry shaking is trying to aerate the egg whites, and what a better way to try to aerate something than using a frother as
Sure.
you would with milk, and it just makes it that much easier.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Now, your cedar smoked rye recipe involves flaming cedar chips with a kitchen
Mhm.
torch and trapping the smoke under a jar before pouring rye whiskey in, which sounds amazing. Um, I mean, did that ever go wrong? I mean, like the ferments, have you had different
You know
things
what?
happen?
I've been pretty lucky. I have smoked myself out once or twice.
Okay.
With proper ventilation is always good when you're
Sure.
doing anything like that.
Yep. Or
But
the
I mean,
fire department coming in because it set off the alarms.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And like I said, there's that's kind of like the easy that's more of like the easy way to do it at home without having to like really buy any expensive tools on top of what you already have.
Okay.
But like there's also things called like a smoking gun where you can kind of put the little wood chips on the top and you've got like a long kind of funnel tube that kind of like concentrates the smoke,
Okay.
which is great. But yeah, I mean like the smoke ethers have like a lot of obviously like aroma, so that aroma is just being trapped in the actual like booze itself, and it doesn't overpower the alcohol, but it just gives it a little bit more depth to whatever you're making. And for that particular cocktail, that was my Manhattan variation that I called the Kumbaya because it reminded me of like sitting around a fire pit on the beach singing Kumbaya. So it's got a little
Nice.
roasted marshmallow as the garnish on that, and then like the cedar smoke and it was all kind of like those memories of sitting on a beach in Tofino and
Yeah,
drinking a
yeah.
delicious cocktail.
That sounds wonderful. And you described the Regal Shake as shaking a cocktail with a piece of citrus peel for a touch of bitterness and citrus oils without adding to the volume of the drink. Are there other professional secrets that home bartenders can use like that?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, trying to think if there's like some fun tidbits. The Regal Shake is a good one. Also done where you can actually take the spring from your Hawthorne strainer, like off the strainer itself, and throw that into your shaker tin if you want to kind of like again kind of aerate or whip something up. So if you're making like a whipped cream for a specialty coffee, or if you're shaking something with egg whites, it really helps add that extra bit of bounce and volume. And
Okay.
that's kind of like a fun
Cool.
little side hack if you don't have a milk frother. And yeah, I mean, even so, like you can also use flavored ice. Like if you want to like
Oh,
really like, shake things up, all the pun intended, but using a flavored ice, because like I said, you do get some of that melt obviously off the ice for your dilution. So if
right.
you want to make, say, like coconut water, ice cubes, and then shake your daiquiri with that, that's gonna give off a little
Ah,
bit of that flavor from when you're shaking.
right. That's great. I love that. Well, speaking of daiquiris, you write that the the daiquiri with just rum, lime, and sugar is used as a litmus test to see if a bartender is capable of making a decent drink. Has a bartender ever failed your daiquiri test, or have most you've run into been able to do it?
Listen, I feel like it's one of those, it's the concept of a basic cocktail of being three ingredients, right? It's
Right.
sugar, it's a spirit, it's citrus juice. It's one of
Okay.
those things where it's like, how hard is that to mess up? But you'd be surprised that the balance, right? It's really all about the
Right.
balance, because
Sure.
depending on the rum that you're using for a daiquiri, like if I'm using something like Ray and Nephew, which is an overproof rum, then I need to adjust the other elements to that
Mm,
rum. If I'm using like an aged rum versus, a barrel style rum, everything's going to be a little bit different. So it has always been kind of one of those like litmus tests for bartenders, because it's only three ingredients. It shouldn't be too hard to mess up, but you gotta really hone in on that balance. And
mm,
that's when you can tell when a bartender is really on it. You can tell that their balance is right. Everything is kind of tasting, the way that it should. It's not too hot on the palate. It's not too sweet. It's not too, too acidic. But because it's a three ingredient drink, it's one of those ones where you can be like, hey, you shouldn't mess this one up. So if you do, then we got some more training to do.
yep. And then you call the Negroni boozy, bitter, and bold,
Hmm.
and a drink that you either love or hate. Tell me about the most stubborn Negroni hater you converted. How did you, or if you did?
It might
Um,
be myself, to be honest. I
oh,
am I
okay.
am not personally a Negroni drinker. It's not it's I can tell when one has been made well and when it's not been not made well. But for me personally, it's not the first drink that I'm going to have. So if you can like put a Negroni in front of me that you've put your own little twist on, and I go back for that second or third sip, then I'm like, all right, you've converted me. Job well done. So even in the book, my version of the Negroni, I call the high and dry. For me, that's a little bit more on the lighter side, because it does have that kind of spritzed element, because I add a little bit of kava into the actual build itself, and I swap out, what do I swap out? The sweet vermouth for like Saint Germain, so elderflower. So it gives it a little bit more of that lighter, which I call it a Negroni with training wheels. But I think I might be my toughest customer when it comes to
Well, that's a
Negronis.
good thing. Quality assurance, right,
Exactly.
with you. Um, has there ever been a request for a cocktail that customer made that kind of made you groan inwardly, or have there been any odd requests? Maybe you didn't groan, but something that was really strange that a customer requested.
You know what? I'm sure I've had several odd requests over the years. Um, but I am like, this is going to be the most diplomatic answer you've ever heard. But I want people to drink what they want to drink. If you
Okay.
like it, who am I to say that's wrong? Because you're the one drinking it, right? I might be
Mm-hmm.
able to offer up some sort of, suggestion to maybe make it a little bit better or just to tweak it slightly. But I am, if somebody says they want to drink, I don't know, gin and milk, then who am I to say no? But, like I will often like, maybe ask a second or a third question if I think something's a little bit off. I'll be like, okay, did you mean to say this or did you mean to say that? And always want to double check and want to make sure. But it's
Sure.
one of those things where I'm like, hey, I am here to be the facilitator, not to be the hater on what you like to drink, because at the end of the day, you're the one drinking it, and if you're enjoying it, hey, to each their own.
That's very
To
open
each their own.
minded.
I'm gonna say that's my diplomatic answer.
Yeah. I don't know. If I was working as a bartender, I'm not sure I could do White Zinfandel, but That's why I'm not a bartender.
There you go,
Um,
right? Listen, I like a drink called a calimocho, and a calimocho is red wine and Coca-Cola. And I feel like
oh,
most wine snobs or anybody out there would probably be like, "What is that?" And I'd be like, "Listen, if you've never had it, you should try it because it's actually delicious." And
well, yeah.
it's a drink like that came
China?
out of
No.
Spain.
Oh, Spain.
Yeah,
Okay.
out of kind of like the cider region of Spain. And it was like a really it's not nothing fancy. It's really
Oh,
cheap. You use the cheapest red wine you got and you mix it with Coca-Cola and there you go. And I was
I'm
like,
sure
I
it's
will drink.
improved.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, there were stories back in the 80s when the rise of the Asian market, I think it was especially China, but they were pouring Coke into first growth Bordeaux, which,
Interesting.
retails for
Okay.
$500 a bottle.
Yeah.
So that's probably when you get the sort of kind of
Yeah.
reaction
Yeah.
from wine lovers.
Yes.
But if you're talking about cheap red wine and go for
Exactly.
it. Just
I
don't
used to
do
have
that to a
a
first Bordeaux.
I used to have a regular. I mean, this is years ago. At a restaurant I worked at, he would order Louis Trey, which is like a very, very, very expensive cognac. I'm talking about probably like $500 an ounce. And he used
Oh,
to order Louis Trey to be flambéed into his bananas Foster
oh my
tableside.
gosh.
I
Oh
was like,
my goodness.
it went from a $15 dessert to a, $600 dessert just like that.
That is incredible. I
Yeah,
guess he
I was
had a
like,
trust fund or something. I
it's one of
mean,
those things. It's like just because you can doesn't mean you should, but
should.
hey, go for
Wow.
it. All the power to
Okay.
you.
Wow. You write that you've never in 20 years behind the bar had anyone order a zombie. Why do bartenders keep put drinks on the menus that people don't order? Are they just there for placeholders?
Sometimes they are. It depends on where you are. It's like a zombie is a pretty classic tiki cocktail. So if you are, I would say maybe in like the tropics in Hawaii or somewhere where like the tiki culture is like very strong,
Okay.
then
What's in
sure, then
it, by the
that's
way,
oh
in a
gosh, it's
zombie?
like it's a mix of rums and allspice
Uh,
and
okay.
like orgeat. It for the classic zombie, it's a very particular three rum blend, which
Okay.
I can't even get my hands on here where I live. So if I was gonna try to make a classic zombie, I probably couldn't. But yeah, it's one of those ones where it's like the alcohol content in it is rather high. So when you
Mm,
do order one, it's usually like a one, maybe two max. That's all you can have because,
okay.
like I said, it's pretty boozy. It's pretty impactful. So you're on a different level if you're drinking zombies all night long. That's for sure.
Yeah, might be Night of the Living Dead or whatever.
I
So,
mean,
what's your favorite drink? I mean, I get asked this, what's your favorite wine? It's a tough one, but do you have like one lately that you've been enjoying?
honestly, like I will drink a margarita any day of the week in any style. I mean, obviously, like I have my preferred like build on it, but like I will drink it on the rocks, I'll drink it blended, I will drink it, on a beach, I'll drink it in a fancy restaurant. I love a margarita.
What do you love
Um
about it?
I think I personally love like citrus forward cocktails to begin with.
Okay.
For me, it's just the balance. Like I love tequila and I think it's just such a fresh, delicious spirit that
Hmm.
it makes for like a really great base for any drink. But yeah, there's just something about a margarita where it's like you got the saltiness, you've got the sweet and sour, but then you've got this nice punch of tequila. For me, it's just kind of like this perfect little combination of ingredients all coming together.
And what's your preferred build?
Well, I like a Blanco, using a Blanco tequila, a bit of like Cointreau or orange liqueur, just a touch of a simple syrup, preferably like a vanilla bean simple syrup. Obviously lime juice, but depending on the tequila that I'm using, whether it's like a little bit higher proof or not, then my ratios kind of change. But yeah, I mean, I like to keep it pretty simple. It's
Okay.
a
That
little
sounds
salt on the
delicious.
rim. I'm into
Yeah,
it. Yep.
sounds great. What are two or three questions that a customer can ask of a bartender when they're not really sure what they want, but they'd like to try something new? How can they ask questions in a way that as a bartender you'll help them find something that they'll love?
Yeah, you know what? It should be the other way around. If you're at a
Okay.
if you're at a bar and you're chatting with a good bartender, they should be the ones asking you the questions. Because if you're like, hey, I'm not sure what I feel like, but I like this. So if you have maybe like one or two drinks in mind that you're like, I like a Cosmo and I like a Spritz, but I don't want either, you know, and maybe there's something in the middle. Hopefully you'll have a bartender kind of come back to you and say like, okay, well, like what kind of base spirit do you like? Are you a fan of vodka? Are you a fan of gin?
Mm-hmm.
And what don't you like? Like what don't
Right.
you like? Maybe because maybe that person's like, I absolutely hate Campari, so don't give me anything with Campari. So there should be like a little bit of a conversation that way. If you, like I said, not all bartenders are gonna, play, but at the same time they should. Um,
Sure.
we're in the business of hospitality, so it's part of being hospitable. But I think it's okay to be very forward with what you like and what you don't like. So if you're at a bar and you're asking a bartender like, I really want to drink, but you know what? I don't like gin and I don't like Campari, and I'm looking for something fresh and a little bit on the fruity side. It's good to have some of those descriptor words to kind of like lead with, I would say.
And who's the most interesting customer you've ever served? Like, you don't have to name names, but an interesting, odd, funny, celebrity, whatever customer.
Ooh, I have some stories. I
Okay,
like
share, spill the tea.
I'm gonna say Vancouver's an interesting place to kind of work because we're kind of known as like Hollywood North at times because there's a
Ah,
lot of things that film up here. And
sure.
there was one night that I was working and I was serving Angelica Houston, and that was
Hmm.
like one of those things where it's like I grew up watching all of her movies like Witches and Addams Family and everything else in between. And
Right.
she was lovely, and she was drinking some Canadian whiskey, and I think I got her to start quoting lines from the movie Witches, and that was like never in my life did I think that would be on my bucket list, but
That's
it's always
great.
entertaining to see people like, especially that you kind of like admire with their guard down because they're just, wanting to have a nice drink and everybody talks to the bartender.
That's
So
excellent.
I've come across some interesting people for sure along my 20 years of doing it.
And are you the secret keeper for a lot of people? Like, do they tell you their stories or their woes or ask you for advice?
Sometimes, like you've definitely, like, especially on a night where it's maybe not as busy behind the bar, you kind of get to chatting with people, and maybe after that second cocktail, they open up a little bit more than maybe they anticipated. But
Sure.
yeah, I mean, I think as a bartender, you're always listening, whether or not you're in on the conversation. Like you've kind
Right.
of always got like your ear to what's happening around you. So whether you think
Mm-hmm.
the bartender is paying attention or not, secretly, we're always paying.
Okay. Whoa. Better be on our guard. I suspect that's true. Is there anything you've learned since publishing the book that you'd either add to a new edition or that might be the basis for your next book?
Yeah, I like I mean, I feel like people are more and more interested in learning new skills and challenging themselves. So I think like, if I do another book or the next edition or what have you, I think I would like to, put some more challenging kind of like techniques and recipes in there because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I've learned now over these last few years and especially putting the book out that when people really like the world of cocktails, they love it and they're willing to go like all in. So they're willing to try the interesting technique that you're like, I'm just going to put this out here like on social media and see if somebody does it. And then you get a influx of people being like, I tried this, I tried it, I tried it, I tried it. And you're like, oh, okay. Like didn't expect anybody to try that, but that's amazing. So
That's
I
great.
think, yeah, challenge, putting a bit more of a challenge out there, I think will be the next goal.
Yeah, that would make a logical next step. They start with this book and then they
There you
graduate
go.
to your
Keep
next one.
working up. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And what's the most useful cocktail gadget you've ever come across? One that we might want to
Ooh.
have at home?
I mean, honestly, like it's pretty basic, but like the jigger. So
Mm,
I'm a
the
big,
measurement.
yeah, I'm a big fan of
Yeah.
just looking at my collection over here to the side. I'm a big fan of, especially if you're first starting off, making cocktails, and if you're not super confident in kind of like your pouring and your measurements, it's always good to measure your drinks because I feel like cocktails are a lot like baking, where measurements
Mm,
matter.
okay.
If you've got a little bit too much of this or a little bit too little of that, it makes a
Yep.
big difference on the final result. Measurements matter, so I always have a jigger close by because yeah, I like to measure it out, make sure it's perfect every time and consistent. So it's good for
Right.
consistency.
That's great.
Because you can use anything as a shaker. You can use a protein shaker, you can use a mason jar, you can use whatever, anything that closes with a lid, right? So I
Right.
think the jigger is the most important.
Cool. Just a few quick questions now. If you could put up a billboard in downtown Vancouver, what would you put on it?
Oh gosh. I would probably put on it, buy my book.
Fair enough. Yes.
Be like, hey, book's on sale. Three cheers. Drink what you like. Have fun with it. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, probably some shameless self promotion. How about that?
Of course, your publisher will be very pleased with you, Kaitlyn.
I mean,
Yes. Oh, I take advantage of the free advertising space as well.
yeah.
Now, of all the things we've talked about, what do you think are the three most important takeaways? Maybe beyond drink what you like or whatever, but like when it comes to cocktails, what would you advise listeners?
I would say you don't have to go expensive when it comes to ingredients,
Okay.
but when you're making a drink, you should be using ingredients that, you know, that you would drink on their own. So don't buy like the cheapest of the cheap vodka out there or whatever the case may be, because if you're drinking it by itself and if you're going, "Oh, this is disgusting," then it's probably not going to taste the best in
Sure.
a drink either. But that
Yeah,
doesn't mean
that's
you
like
have to go
cooking.
like exactly.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't mean you have to go full tilt and buy like, $100 bottle of something, but you should use ingredients that you would enjoy on their own. Fresh is always best. So especially when you're using juices and cocktails, if you can freshly squeeze your lemon and your lime juice, then absolutely do that before buying, store bought off the shelf pasteurized stuff.
Okay.
Because like I said, when you freshly squeeze, you're not just getting the juice, but you're getting a little bit of the oils off of the peel. You're getting a bit of that
Mm,
pith. You're getting a lot more nuance and that fresh flavor.
right.
And I would say keep it simple. You can always build out. So if you start with like a simple basic recipe, like a sour, like we were talking earlier, those three ingredients, spirit, sugar, and citrus, start
Hmm.
there and then build out from it. Because you can always add to something, you can never take away. So
Sure.
yeah, good
That makes
ingredients,
sense. That's a
always
great.
fresh, keep it simple.
That's excellent advice. I love that. Now, as we wrap up here, Kaitlyn, is there anything we haven't covered that you wanted to mention?
Think so. I mean, if you want to learn more about cocktails and interesting techniques, you can always follow me on my social platforms under Likeable Cocktails. I'm always posting videos on Instagram and on TikTok and YouTube. And yeah, you kind of get like step by step instructions. So if you're keen and interested and want to kind of like up your game, then go ahead and give me a follow and
Yeah,
get yourself a copy of Three Cheers, because then you'll have one right there
absolutely.
at your fingertips too.
And so, Three Cheers, it's available on all the
Everywhere.
major bookstore
Yeah, everywhere
websites
books are
and so on.
sold. You got
Okay,
it.
cool. That is great. Well, Kaitlyn, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. This has been wonderful. You've really, I feel far more educated now and on
Perfect.
cocktails and motivated to try one of yours to not
I
just
think
look
you
at the
should.
pictures, but actually make a drink. Um, so we will wrap up now, but don't log off just yet. But thank you, and I hope next time we can have a cocktail in person.
Absolutely, would love that. Thank you for having
Okay.
me on.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.